Welcome to Pirate Politics, where we prepare you for your next political conversation. I'm Jeronimo Cortina, political science professor at the University of Houston.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus, also a political science professor here at the University of Houston. Kind of an exciting week. We have the Dallas Mavericks suing the Dallas Stars, and then the Stars are countersuing. We've got Trump with beef with cattle producers. This dad joke will make sense to you in a few minutes, right? The Cougs are bowl eligible for the first time in I don't even know how long, right?
Couple of years.
Couple of years at least, yeah.
Close.
And the shutdown's still happening, so just kind of whirlwind of things.
Yep.
But let's start internationally.
Okay.
The kind of premise for Donald Trump's last couple of months has been that he is now a foreign policy president. And
absolutely.
The kind of crisis resolution in Gaza has been the kind of cornerstone of his second term.
Yeah.
But the problem is that is a very fragile piece.
It is.
This week, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered powerful strikes against the some of the forces in southern Gaza. The Israelis say that this is a result of attacks that are happening to basically ban or kind of challenge the ceasefire, and they also cite delays in returning hostages that were part of the condition of the ceasefire. It's getting messy in a way that, of course, it would in the Middle East. But my question to you is about Donald Trump and what this means about kind of his legacy in foreign policy and the prospects for where people see him politically.
I think he's putting all his eggs in these one basket.
Yeah.
So if he's able to create a lasting peace, more than a month, right?
Yeah.
2 months, 6 months.
It was like 4 days.
Right. Then he's going to accomplish something that no other president has accomplished, even though that they have attempted 11,000 billion times.
Yes.
So I think it's extremely important. If he fails, obviously he will blame someone else.
Right.
But he has been at the center. He has owned it.
Yeah.
And there is potentially no way that he could deflect if this goes south.
That's a great point. Like, he's so invested that you cannot be in a position to blame somebody else.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, like, not his fault because there's only so much you can do as a kind of diplomatic handler on this. But as a third party, the U.S. basically is in a position where if you break it, you buy it. And this is really him investing in a foreign policy crisis that if he resolves it, could potentially get him a Nobel Prize, right? But if he doesn't, then makes it look like he cares more about what happens in other countries than he does about the U.S. So there is this concern that his kind of globetrotting affair is just, kind of neglecting what's going on at home. One example is, like, I've seen this on social media. People say that MAGA now stands for Make Argentina Great Again, referencing the $50 billion bailout that the president is offering to Argentina. But, like, it's more than that, right? There's the Venezuelan crisis. You've got literally the President Trump in Asia at this point, where the South Korean president gave him a gold crown. So much for the No Kings thing. But, so there's a kind of sense that, that he is premising his kind of legacy on foreign policy when he promised to deliver on domestic policy. The other thing is that the problem for him is that it's not just obviously as a re-election issue because he can't get reelected, but it's a Republican Party issue because the legacy of the kind of Trump phenomenon is about making America better, right? Making kind of these things better off than they were, financially especially, and people don't see that right now. In fact, the polling suggests that he's underwater for both domestic and foreign policy issues, less for foreign policy issues, but still under water on that. So there's, I think, this conundrum that he faces that his party's going to have to grapple with, that if they can't solve these domestic problems, then the international problems don't much matter. It reminds me of George H.W. Bush, who was in the exact same position, right? You are off globetrotting, solving the world's problems when America suffers. Is that a problem for him?
It is a problem. And it is a problem because we are 1 year away from the midterm elections.
Stop reminding me.
Well, I mean, it is my job to remind you and remind you all.
It actually is, yeah.
But it is extremely consequential.
Yeah.
It is extremely consequential because, first of all, We haven't seen the economic demise that everybody, including us, thought of the tariffs. We might see it. It's creeping in slowly but surely, right? It wasn't that economic demise from, one day or another because people anticipated what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So once the stocks start going down, and then we start feeling those tariffs, then we're going to feel them one way or the other.
Yeah.
In his globetrotting, he has been trying to secure these trade deals a little bit more advantageous to the U.S. And I get the point.
Yeah.
I get the point that the U.S. was taking advantage in so many cases. So he's trying to reverse that in a way that has been extremely aggressive, and we'll see if that's going to have an impact on the U.S. economy. That's one thing. The other thing has to do with prices and has to do with inflation.
Yeah.
And inflation is still growing little by little, but people feel it, right? There has been some reports, as you say, by some media organizations that, for example, Latino support for Trump has basically cut in half from 40-something% to the low 20s.
Yeah.
So that has implications for the midterm election. That has implications for how people are saying, wait, you told me about Make America Great Again.
Yeah.
Yes, thumbs up, but... I don't feel it.
It's on the hat. It's a reminder all the time that that's what we want. The other thing, too, is that the president, of course, negotiating with the Argentinians has been imported more beef, right? Which the cattle growers, providers are saying, this is a problem. So it's a kind of real violation of that. You have people like John Thune saying it's a problem. You have people like Sid Miller here in Texas saying, instead of bringing in beef, let's bring in actual cattle, and then we'll raise the cattle. But that has its own set of problems. So that interaction is definitely kind of complicated, too. So, I think that you look at the economy, and although the Fed is likely to cut rates, you see inflation increasing, you see consumer confidence kind of flat, you see job growth slowing. So there are some real kind of negative signs here, even as the market kind of continues
especially when you're looking at medium or lower, the middle class at the end of the distribution. These are the folks that are being basically squeezed out.
So true.
And that is extremely important because, millionaires and billionaires may not feel it very much. But the middle class is actually feeling it. I mean, the price of vehicles have gone skyrocket, rent, electricity, so on and so forth. And these are things that you're paying, insurance, that you're paying every single day.
Yeah, totally. And, there's a chance that AI will replace all of us, including you and me.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
we could have avatars here doing this instead of us. Which, some weeks I'm like, okay, good. You're in charge of this now, Avatar. Because we are yet to continue to talk about the shutdown, right? Which still continues this week. And it's amazing to see how long it's gone on. But there are some signs maybe it won't be much longer because you do see a lot of these kind of policy crises percolating, like the SNAP benefits are ending and military is not being paid. But it's still that both sides are dug in pretty hard on this. Both think that they have negotiating leverage. Republican leaders have internal conversations about, trying to get an extended funding situation for trading, comes some additional funding for the government in the short term. Donald Trump has accepted $130 million from Timothy Mellon, who apparently can just write checks like that, just like you. That money is supposed to go to paying the troops.
I use monopoly money, but
It still works,
Oh, okay.
Well, it almost might be because it's such a small amount of money for the troops, right? But has serious consequences in terms of how the government gets funded, making Congress irrelevant, making effectively this illegal sort of possibility that you're kind of allocating money that you don't have. And so there are all kinds of problems with how things are happening right now. So I think that they're really kind of fumbling over themselves to try to get this done. But there are serious policy consequences to this because the SNAP benefits are ending. Texas has about 1.5 million people on SNAP, and 1.7 of those are children. So there's a lot of potential problems here as the economy falls out because of this. There's a chance that about $600 million in spending doesn't happen in Texas because SNAP benefits go away. What is your take on the kind of place that the shutdown is right now? And is there a prospect for this to be done by the time the show comes out? We're here midweek. Will it be done by the time the show comes out or not?
I mean, I don't know. The real consequences are going to be felt starting November 1st. First of all, that's when potentially you're going to get, that's when the Affordable Care Act renewal portal opens. So that's one point in favor of Democrats, to put it that way. But then you have this issue of SNAP that could affect 42 million people. Not at the same time, not on November 1st or anything like that. It's going to be, one way or the other escalated through day 1, 2, 3, and 4. But still. Yeah. And the irony of this thing is, for example, that the House is not in session.
They haven't been in session.
For a couple of weeks. It's like, wait, what?
There's no negotiation happening at that level. And maybe they don't need to be, but for sure it's the case that you'd like to see movement from the kind of leaders on this.
Yeah, but still you have, committee meetings, subcommittee meetings.
You could do something.
You could work.
They're still being paid. They're still being paid. They ought to do something for it, right?
So those things are going to hit eventually constituents, and they're going to be asking these questions and like, wait, what? You're not in session? Why are you not showing up to work? One thing. The other thing is the internal battles now perhaps more clear within the Republican Party than the Democrats. Democrats seem to be, for once, pretty well organized and unified in their stance. But for Republicans, you see Marjorie Taylor Greene raising the alarm. A couple of senators also saying like, maybe we should be like sitting down right now and start negotiating with Democrats, because this is going to hit our people, our constituents as well.
Yeah, it's so true. So we'll watch this and see how it goes, but it doesn't look like we're going to see a serious resolution anytime soon, but there are hints that maybe we will. It's a lot of financial pinch that's going to take, I think, for this to happen. Let's shift gears and talk Texas and the power Greg Abbott has over the judiciary. He is appointing a former Solicitor General, also a former counsel for the governor, Kyle Hawkins, to the Texas Supreme Court. This makes 107 appointments that he's made. He is closing in on Rick Perry's record, which is 125. So there's a lot of judicial kind of power that he has essentially over the politics of the court. He is quietly leaving his mark on the Texas judiciary, which I think is fascinating. But he's doing so in a way that is like his allies, his staff, his former advisors are in these positions. So there's a lot of kind of Abbott fingerprints all over this. The other is that you're seeing, I think, potentially more power for the governor on Proposition 12 if it passes. Now, we have an election this week, you may remember. So one of the things that Prop 12 does is to give more power to the governor potentially on disciplining judges. It allows the governor to appoint people to the board that oversees this. Right. So there's a lot more, I think, here that is built into this one appointment, which, on the face of it maybe doesn't mean much, but when you cut into it really does, I think, give you a sense that the Republicans are leaving a lasting mark on this. Greg Abbott especially is leaving his mark on that. And this is the kind of last great moment where you've got sort of Republicans able to have a partisan stamp on the state, right? The kind of last frontier in a way. So what is your take on how what this all means to the judicial system and to the politics of Texas?
Well, I think there's two things. On the political side is, Abbott has been a very well and very good and effective political operator in terms of fundraising, but also in terms of making these appointments, right? Yeah. And that's extremely important because eventually the Supreme Court justices, Texas Supreme Court justices are going to run, but they have a leg up. Yeah. And they have the power of incumbency, and that kind of works.
They could pull like a John Cornyn or a Greg Abbott. They're going to filter their way into the political side of things, the strictly political side of things. Yeah.
But in terms, here becomes the tricky question, and that is judicial independence.
Yeah.
Right? We have judicial elections in this state.
Yes.
In order to be able to have the sanctity of the division of powers between the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branch. Yeah. That is why we have elections.
Yes.
And it's kind of, wait, what?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what are we doing? Because I don't understand.
We talk to people in other states, and they're like confused about why we elect judges. And we're not the only state that does that, right? A handful of states do. But for sure, it does create this kind of conundrum. And the more politically tied these judges are to the party in power, the more likely you are to see the outcomes reflect what they want. So there is this kind of problem, as you're saying, about this lack of independence. They have it technically, but there are these concerns. And so that definitely creates a problem, potentially. Enough of a problem that sometimes you're going to want to take a Tylenol just to cure the headache. But is certainly something that Ken Paxton would like you not to do, because he is suing the Tylenol and the makers of Tylenol, that is Johnson & Johnson, because he argues that they hid autism risks. Now, remember, we talked about this weeks ago. There's this kind of public discussion about the role of Tylenol in creating autism or ADHD, and obviously the Attorney General has picked up on this and has made this the kind of centerpiece of the week. So what do you make of this lawsuit? Is they going to be successful? Is it just politics? What's going on?
It's acetaminophen.
Acetaminophen, yes.
Yeah,
okay, yeah. That's good. How many times did you practice that?
I practice a lot.
In the mirror?
I can say it in Spanish with no problem, but in English it's a little bit more complicated.
It's a challenge,
but,
I agree.
I got it. Well, I mean, I think it's 11,000 2 billion % political.
Political, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, there is no science behind, Tylenol creating autism is a claim that has not been backed by science. I'm not saying that it will or will not. It's just that the evidence is not there yet.
And for it to be a successful lawsuit, you have to have that linked.
Yes.
And if it's not, then
there
harms
is no
aren't
link.
there.
But we are in the midst of a three-way primary election.
Interesting, yeah. I've heard of this,
And I think that Paxton movies is politically very savvy because he's basically backing up President Trump in terms of his claims about Tylenol, autism, women's health, etc., etc. And perhaps get an edge in terms of that wink that one of the three is really, really trying to get from President Trump.
That's a great point. We'll talk about this in a second, but I think the closer to Trump you are in this primary, the more better off you are. And this will help him in that. It made national news. And so even if it's not a Trump thing, even if Trump ends up endorsing somebody else or not endorsing at all, it's still the case that Paxton is going to be able to raise money off of this. And
yes, absolutely.
That's for sure true.
Absolutely.
I think we're seeing, certainly as we've talked about, a change in how attorneys general function, so that it's much more political. That's not surprising to us because we've seen Attorney General Paxton do this a lot. But there's a chance that this backfires and that it's a case that may actually not go anywhere, right? As we said, there are the contested claims about whether there's scientific proof for this. So that's by itself an issue. The other is that there's a kind of what they call it like a safe harbor issue for companies who sell over-the-counter drugs. As long as they're labeling it properly, then they're kind of immune from some of this. And so there just is a complicated legal question. It may not actually happen that way. There's also a kind of timing issue, right? In terms of the statute of limitations, when does it start and kind of who's affected? Lots of different conundrums about this. So this is a big case that I'm not sure the Attorney General's office has the capacity to prosecute. It reminds me of the smoking case, right? The cigarettes kind of conflict in the legal system in the 80s and 90s. And that was a tremendously long battle. And so this is a battle that they need to be prepared to fight for the long term. And I'm just not sure they are. So in part because Ken Paxton could be a senator, right? Literally, in 2 years. And so it may just be that it goes away. But that's an important kind of distinction, I think, that's worth making here. Another kind of legal conundrum the state faces is about the Texas Education Agency taking over the Fort Worth Independent School District. This happened last week. The North Texas District is the 11th since 2000 to be taken over by the state and the second largest after HISD. In practice, what this means is that they're going to get rid of the democratically elected board. They're going to appoint a new superintendent of operations. It's really all connected to one school that the district already closed that didn't meet expectations. But it's been kind of a long time coming and definitely speculated about for a long while. So I guess my question to you is what this means in the context of the politics of things, but also how it affects educational outcomes for the students in those districts.
So I think it's the politics of education, right? I mean, as you said, it is one campus that has triggered the takeover of around 135 schools in the district that most of them have a passing grade.
Yeah.
So is it a gray line? Absolutely, right? But one of the things here that is important to take into account is to think about students. So if the takeover is going to improve students' outcomes one way or the other, perfect, right? Does that happen?
Right.
Yes and no, sometimes iffy.
Yeah, it's mixed.
Yes.
And although, Mike Morath, the TEA head, says, in every case it's been led to improvements, including in Houston. There's still a lot of, I think, contested storylines about this. The other thing is that I think that the kind of role of the state in public education has become really complicated and politically fraught. So you've got teachers who feel like they can't teach. You've got librarians who feel like they can't choose books. You've got administrators who feel squeezed financially. You've got parents who feel like they don't have a voice. And it makes it worse when you've got this kind of takeover situation. So there are real implications to this politically.
And the irony is that we're talking about ISDs. Independent school districts. So yes, I mean, if it's going to be controlled by the state, okay, fine, controlled by the state. But let's not pretend that this is something independent. I understand the guardrails that TEA has. I understand and support them 100%. But getting rid of a democratically elected board is kind of like, what are we doing to these substantially or substantively in terms of our representative democratic processes,
that's a good point.
And that is extremely important because we live in a republic that the basis of our democracy is based on representation. And we're just coming in and say, you know what? Nope.
No, when we talk to our students about the kind of levels of government, there are so many in Texas. We have so many different governments. And that means that, people have closer representation. But in this case, of course, they don't. And that limitation, I think, does have definite political implications. And so, like we talked about weeks ago, Abbott obviously is up for re-election. I don't think he's like extremely vulnerable, but on this, I do think he's going to get some serious backlash. And so there is, I think, a real kind of political consequence to this. But speaking of political consequences, let's talk about the Senate race, which has dominated discussion on both the Republican and Democratic sides of things. This week, Jasmine Crockett, who is a representative from North Texas, says that she is strongly considering getting into the race if it's the case that the courts uphold the redistricting. Just as a note, Dallas would be left with 3 Democratic House seats, 2 House seats instead of 3. She would still probably have her seat, but definitely the number is shrinking, and she is unhappy about it. It would be ironic if the redistricting caused her to run, and then she ends up winning. Bring the Democrats out of this wilderness. Maybe karma, exactly, which is what she talked about. There's a chance that this would work. I mean, polling suggests that she's ahead or just slightly behind most of her other competitors in the Democratic primary. She leads women by 5%. She leads blacks by 30%. She leads boomers like you by 15%. She leads Gen Xers like me by 12%. So there's definitely like a kind of sort of moment for her here, right? Now, if she chooses to run or not, we don't know yet, but that's the speculation. The matchups with the potential Republicans, Cornyn or Paxton, have her winning, but sometimes tied. So there's lots of kind of unknowns here, but this would definitely shake up the Democratic race for sure.
100%. And the way that she debates ignites the Democratic base.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I understand Representative Albert, Representative Talarico have very particular ways of doing it. Talarico, maybe it's a little bit more intellectual in terms of the arguments, quoting.
It's like a slow burn, slow faith-based burn.
Exactly. And you have Jasmine Crockett just entering the room and saying, boom, boom, boom. And it's, when you compare it, it's very akin to what, for example, President Donald Trump would do in a debate.
That's a good point,
And that ignites the base. So I think it would redefine the Democratic primary in such a way that it would be very interesting. And if she enters and if she wins, the general election is going to be very interesting. Just imagine having... Just think about it. Having Jasmine Crockett against Senator Cornyn or A.G. Paxton. Or Wesley Hunt.
Or Hunt,
I mean...
the matchups are really intriguing on this. So let's talk about the Republican side because we don't know who's going to win that. Right. John Cornyn has been, I think, pretty effective in unleashing ads and digital attacks. So he released a Texas Fair themed video game online that lets people hurl dunk tank balls at the the Democratic rivals, Allred, Tallarico, and O'Rourke, just because O'Rourke's always the kind of, poster child for the Democrats. He's unleashed attack ads against Wesley Hunt, saying that Wesley Hunt missed a bunch of votes. Wesley Hunt said, well, I had a kid and special needs issues, and so he obviously was absent for a lot of that. But I think that Cornyn's approach is pretty clever here. And so there is a kind of moment of kind of him being able to combat his rivals who are both against him. But Hunt's internal polling he released this week says that Cornyn's numbers are still pretty bad. Just 20% in Hunt's poll says that they would vote for Cornyn, and 62% say they'd vote somebody else. So that reelect number is pretty bad. It definitely doesn't look great for John Cornyn. And the polling that's changed is really kind of just brought Paxton down and hasn't really brought Cornyn up. So he hasn't changed much, and we haven't had any negative ads against him. So there's still a lot of kind of time in this race to unfold.
A lot of time and a lot of money that needs to be spent.
Hope you like ads because they're coming to your mailbox.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to be all over, the digital. It's going to be pretty much wall to wall, I think, between now and in the primary.
Absolutely. And it's going to be extremely interesting to see how he starts to shape up towards next year, because eventually one of these three are going to win.
Yeah, totally. The last point is on fundraising. In the third quarter for the district here in Houston, Congressional District 18, Isaiah Martin, who is kind of a dark horse, but who at least presents a kind of real sort of progressive side of things, right, in that wing against establishment Democrats like Christian Menefee and Amanda Edwards, raised almost $1 million. He's got 1.4 on hand. He's made it a 3-person race. That's pretty impressive in a short period.
It is very impressive. Yeah. And we're going to see how that translates into how competitive this race is going to be. Yeah. But obviously, that's something that we're going to keep tabs for our next week. I'm Jeronimo Cortina.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus. The party keeps up next week.